All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Android Talk. Remember, we had our first Android Talk during the opening of the chapter last month, but I'm so happy to have you all here joining us. Tonight, I'll be introducing a very, very special guest from New York. She is a senior Android engineer who has worked on several projects, development projects in the past, including the banking mobile app for Goldman Sachs. Her name is Aida Issayeva. Hi, Aida. How are you doing?
Hi, Mauricio. I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. It's really good to see you again.
It's really great to see you too. So great to see you.
Yeah, awesome. So before we begin with the talk, why don't you tell us a little bit about what projects you've been working on? You told me you're working currently at DoorDash. What have you been up to lately?
Yeah. So I joined DoorDash almost 6 months ago. It's been already 6 months. The time flies by so quickly. And right now I am working on building map part of the DoorDash so that users can interact with the map, see the restaurants on the map, and order from them. And it's not only displaying the map and restaurants, but it's also being able to see the menu items. You can directly see from the map, like or like you can search menu item like French fries right nearby you, and then you can see all the restaurants that have those French fries and with the pricing on it. So it's all about like elevating the experience and helping users to find the food faster for them. And in most cases, it's also important to visualize how far it is from them. You know, they would like to know maybe they can just go pick up the food instead of trying to do the delivery. And map helps to visualize that part of the work. So that's what I've been working on.
Wow, that's great. And have you been using Android development for this project as well, right?
Yes, I've been using Android development for this one.
And what about Jetpack Compose? Have you included it? Not yet.
So Jetpack Compose I've been using on my side projects. I did not start using on the production app for DoorDash because we do have levels of, we wait until it becomes stable and its release is already stable, by the way. But it also because we have levels of different teams that are responsible for bringing different libraries and validating that the library will be good. So, and that one, it's still on our roadmap, but we're not going to be integrating Jetpack Compose yet stuff.
All
So in
right.
our production app. So I've been
Well,
actually
but
playing around on the side
yeah, right.
projects.
Okay. So, anyways, there are other applications that I know that are already implementing Jetpack Compose at the moment, and I think
Right.
it's very nice. I've seen on the official page that Airbnb, for example, is using Jetpack Compose. So I think this is a trend in a new toolkit that will help developers to as you were talking at the beginning about the experience, elevating the experience for the users. And I think definitely Jetpack Compose will help us with that, right?
Definitely. It also will help developers, most importantly, to help focusing on coding, rather than like and be more productive when coding, instead of trying to go through the different files and then spending time allocating the issues and so on. So like Jetpack Compose helps us like to consolidate everything in one file and then understand of the issues that you may experience with the developer.
Yeah, awesome. So just remind you folks that we are focusing tonight on Jetpack Compose, a new powerful tool for Android app development, which is relevant for all the mobile developers joining us tonight, but also for those beginners who are interested in learning more about this wonderful world of development. So, without any further ado, let's start things off. Aida, the floor is totally yours.
Awesome, Cole. Thank you. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
All right. Just making sure my screen is visible. All right, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about Introduction to Jetpack Compose. What is Jetpack Compose? Why is it a big deal? And what we as developers benefit from it. So, a little bit about me. I'm a software engineer, instructor, and I also build Android apps for a living and been doing Android development for the past 6 years. And so now to Jetpack Compose. If you heard all this hype around Jetpack Compose, you would wonder why there's huge hype happening. It is because when it comes to building UI elements, traditional views and Jetpack Compose differ all the way in the base. It's in the base approach. Back in 2008, when Android came out first, it already had a way to display the UI elements, display everything on the phones per se, right? And because back then, mobile development was not a thing, right? Web development was a thing. A lot of people had laptops and then computers, and then they were able to see and interact. And back then, in web development, HTML and CSS were very popular. And so what Android did, they followed the steps of web development and decided that for Vue, for displaying UI elements, they would have prototypes. Like every UI element on Android would have a prototype that is in XML layout, so you can actually see, as a developer, design it however you want and modify it, right, on the XML itself. And then users will interact with it. Compose has completely different approach. Instead of focusing how to display UI, Compose asks the question what to display. That's the main difference, because here in Compose, the UI elements actually update the information on the UI elements. They get updated based on the data that it's being received. So that's the main difference between traditional views in Android. That's called view-based approach, basically, when they ask the question how to design, versus Compose, it will ask the question about what we're going to design. For example, here, I have a regular feed fragment XML, right? This is the XML layout file that helps me to add some widgets, and I can see the changes happening. So this is what it means by view-based approach, and then the Jetpack Compose declarative approach. It's also important to remember that traditional views require you to juggle multiple different files, right? So if back until 2017, when we had Java language as a primary language for Android development, XML would talk to Java, and then Java would talk to XML, and then now we had Kotlin language introduced. So then Kotlin will still talk to XML as well too, to get the information about the UI elements that are responsible for the screen, and so on. With Compose, there is no need to juggle 3 different or 2 different files in order to display information or any kind of UI information. We can have one Kotlin language file, and from there, display the information. Okay, wait a minute. Let me see what's happening here. Sorry. And if we're gonna go into deep history of building and binding UI in Android, back in 2008, traditional Vue, Android Vue class was introduced in API 1. It also introduced the layouts, the way how we see the UI, right, through XML files. And then the way how XML language and Java language would talk to each other is by method called findViewById. This findViewById is a way to find specific UI element from the layout, grab that UI element, and then bind it, pass the data to it from the view models, so then we can see the information that is coming from the domain or like data layers, right? In 2013, people, Jake Wharton came up with library butter knife. Under the hood, what it was doing was binding UI elements from the XML layout, again, to our Java classes, right? The issue why this butter knife library was introduced to begin with, it's because the find view by ID method, unfortunately, was not null safe, right? So it would, if it cannot find the view, it would crash. Like if it cannot find the view by ID, it would crash. So butter knife came to rescue, and it was a very popular library among Android developers. In 2016, there was another library introduced by Google, data binding. Had the similar idea approach, making sure find view by ID is null safe, but it also being able to pass the data to your XML layout directly. It had a lot of overhead around, took time, to compile and display, and it was not as easy and intuitive for developers, so not many developers adopted. In 2017, when Google announced Kotlin to be the first language, right, announced the support for Kotlin language, Kotlin came up with Kotlin Synthetic. Again, it's another binding option from the XML layout to your Java classes. And then in 2019, there was another one, view binding library came out. Lighter version of the data view binding, but it's still, the idea behind is that we're still gonna access layout XML, right? We're gonna look for that specific view, child view in that layout, and then we're gonna find that view, right? Once we find that view, we're gonna set a data to that view. And then now in 2020, Jetpack Compose, 2021, Jetpack Compose came out. And Jetpack Compose, unlike all other precedents, it does not need to go to XML because you're gonna be building the layout programmatically in one file or like in multiple files. The idea is it's still gonna be within the Kotlin language. There is no need to interact with XML language. To give you an example of how traditionally Vue and then Jetpack Compose Vue work together, I have code snippets. So let's say if we want to make a custom toggle button, right? In traditional Vue, what we would do, we would extend a button and we would actually add constructors. Those the constructors with context, attribute set, and then styles are predefined for us. They're fixed. The only way for us to do anything about that is adding them and extending them, right? Even if we do not need them, like as we said, like here example, null or zero, right? Technically, we don't care about those attributes because we want to get those attributes from the parent. But we would still extend because that's what the app-compat button class was asking us for. In the compose toggle button, it's different because here we don't need to actually extend a class per se. We're actually creating a function, right? And in function, we can modify what kind of parameters we want to pass, how we want to pass as well too, right? So it's not tied to the class base, and then therefore we can decide how we want to pass the parameters. And now to the big difference why traditional Vue was flawed a little bit comparing to Compose, it's because traditional views exposed getters and setters. So you could set the text to the view, you can get the text to the view, which means because of that, there is a possibility that inner state of the view itself might not be the same as the state that you are hoisting to, right? The state that you have right now in your view model, for example. The perfect example with this, it's usually like compound buttons, like checkbox or like radio button. Upon check listener, even if you disable the radio button itself, users can still interact with those toggle buttons. Like they can still click on the radio button, and you'll see from the user's perspective, user thinks that the button was toggled indeed, and its inner state did get changed. But then our outer state, the one that managing the state in the view models, were not aware of this case, right? And in order to prevent that, what usually we developers end up doing that, we would manually toggle the states, right? Update the values of the states and set the text, making sure, like this in this example, we're setting text, making sure that we are aware about the changes in the toggle state, right? So as we see here, there's an if toggle state, then stop, else start, right? And then we expose the toggle callback listener to our fragments or activities, for example. In Compose, what we have is our toggle state is outside of the view itself. It is not inside the view per se, right? So the text button here is stateless. It does not actually depend on the state itself because state is being hosted here outside of defining the UI element. And then here we can see this is a sample example, a very simple example of when we change the toggle state from, we update the value of the toggle state to opposite value of the toggle state, right? And then whenever it happens, the text does get updated as well too. So there is no need to manually set that all the time values. And then, so I created a little bit of table of what kind of big difference it is about the Compose versus traditional views. So when it comes to language, traditional views, usually you use XML layout to build a view. You can extend regular classes, like here, for example, we extended regular view classes. It is possible to do that too. But like most developers, what we often do, we use XML, where we actually build the layout there, and from there we actually bind, inflate that layout and bind UI elements to it. Compose is available only on Kotlin language. So let's say if you're actually developing in Java, right, you won't be able to use Compose. You have to create Kotlin file for that. Luckily, in Android Studio, we can actually, it's interoperable, right? So even if you're working in Java predominant project, you still can create your Kotlin files there. And then you can still call your Kotlin file and functions from the Java and vice versa. So that's good. And in traditional view, the theming usually happens in the manifest XML file. That's where like main base theming gets set. And it is not as easy to modify something if you want to modify, like, let's say in one screen you have one theme, but then in another screen you want to change it to compose with something. It is not as flexible. While in Compose, there's a material theme composable available there, and you can actually update the values of each parameter of this composable anywhere, anytime you want. whether it's a screen 1 or screen 2. And as I mentioned as well, the base of traditional view and the compose in traditional view custom views, they extend the classes. So basically, they end up being classes, and then they extend the Android view class. In Compose, it is all about the function. So it's a method. It's not a class per se. It does not extend. All it has that add composable annotation. And then arguments. Whenever you pass some sort of arguments in traditional view, it is like fixed constructor, like a context attribute sets, right? It's a fixed constructor, and there's not much way for us to modify that stuff. And then because of that, it's not possible. What we have to do is we have to manually create functions like get and set within our custom views as well too. While in Compose, it's a flexible, right? So arguments can be passed, any kind of arguments can be passed to your function because it's a function at the end of the day. And then here's the interesting thing, decorations. In traditional Android view, we use attributes heavily a lot. For example, here, like if we decide to change text color, right? Text color will be text color itself. This will be an attribute, right? Located in the attribute XMLs, basically. It's heavily referenced by that. And whenever we go to the regular code, for example, in order to access attribute values, we have to actually tie to the context itself. We have to find the context. So that's where it gets tricky. Like button set text color. If I want to set text color, I cannot just set some sort of text color, saying primary, for example, right? Color primary. It will give me an error because this is the it's a resource ID, right? It's not actually a color. So to make it send a color, I do have to call context, which is resources, and get the color. Resources, and then get color. And so resources function is basically the one, it's a function that is responsible for converting the elements, again, the values from the XML files into the coding part for us, right? So this kind of stuff does come with a lot of hoops when in regular traditional views, while in Compose, it's a flexible, we use actually modifiers for that. Each element actually has a support for modifier interface, and we can pass it and decide however we want to decorate the UI. And now the most important stuff, why View and Compose is different, it all comes down to the state management. Like, as I mentioned, inner state of, there is a high chance, and it's error prone in traditional Android View when inner state of the UI widget might not match the data state itself. So you can keep clicking as a user, and then the state does get updated from the UI perspective, but it does not get reflected on the data side of things, right? So we still have to manage that part from the UI side, making sure that both data and the UI, the states match. While in Compose, it is recomposition, which means the UI is tied to data and gets automatically changed based on the data that has changed. So that's the one important stuff to keep in mind. I have created, let me see. Yep. I have created a short snippet code to display the the power of Jetpack Compose and explain why it is a huge deal. As I was showing, this is the regular, in regular Android development, the one that we do without Jetpack Compose, even simply setting text color is not possible for us. We have to still call the resources and get the color. While here in Jetpack Compose, all we can do is just set color red. That's going to be easy way to do that. Or if we want to modify, like let's say background specifically, change the background color of this text, right? We can do that too. Also, Compose, because it's like regular coding, right, without interacting too much with the XMLs, Compose UI elements are more intuitive, and then they do have names, right? Like, for example, text, right? In traditional Android view, this one is called text view, right? In Compose, it is just a text where you pass the text label, you decide to, however you want to decorate the modifier, right? So let's say if I want to decorate the modifier to be blue, right? And then I run the app. Jetpack Compose has also the preview annotation that lets you see the updated values here on this side of the page, but the preview is slow, and we still have to manually triggering every time to update the preview. That's what I found a little bit annoying, and prefer using the actual emulator because running and installing is still faster. Then, okay, oh, there you go. So here in text, we modified the background to be blue, and it did get updated to be blue. We can also decide we want to put, actually, let me put this one. We can also decide that, what if I want to add a padding around, right? Like the left padding and right padding, right? So I can decide to put a little bit of padding to it, and it's going to be 8 dps. Since it is. And then I run the app, so I will see there's a space. It's still going to be blue, but it's going to have space between the edge at the screen and the beginning of the text. All right. There you go. So it has an 8 dp space between the text when it begins and where the text itself, UI widget itself, is located. This was actually predominantly issue in traditional Android view when simply setting this kind of background, right? Manipulating the text style was very difficult in regular Android view. So now, when it comes to layouts, right? Layout components in Jetpack Compose, there are 3 primary layout components: columns, box, and rows. So columns, it means all the UI elements will be located vertically, one after another one. Rows means horizontally, one after another one. And box usually means UI elements will be located one on top of another one until you decide however you want to move them around. So those ones are layout components. Here for this example, I used a column because I wanted to place the UI elements one below another one. The text, I get the text from the Viewstate, the title called Select Your Movie. And as you saw, I have modified some values to decorate my text specifically and change the color and then font size. And then we have spacer. So let's say if I don't put the spacer, then it's going to be all cramped up, right, between the text, between the title and the radio buttons. So I added space there. Now, the list of the movies that we're going to get, right, because I have to have not just the radio button, but also the text next to it, what I did is I have created a raw layout component and set the radio button in the beginning and then the text in the end. So then I added spacer, and then in traditional Android view, we have edit text where a user can type in something. In Jetpack Compose, it's called text field, where you can actually type in something, any kind of text, the way you want, and modify the values. And as you see in text fields, we pass the callbacks, value change callbacks, where whenever we know if something does get changed, then we're gonna make our custom call to the view models, right? In this example, adding the custom movies, right? But the value will not get changed right away. It's gonna get triggered from the custom view inside the view state. Like, let's say if in traditional Android view, user can type in anything user wants, it will appear right away upon each click on a keyboard. Here in Jetpack Compose text field, that does not happen. It means you have to manage the callback on value change, making sure that everything gets updated properly on the text field per se. And then classic button as well available. It exposes on-click listener for users. So you can actually decide what you want to do with the on-click. And then, and also it's important to notice that since it's all like DSL language, right? So it's a custom domain-specific language for Jetpack Compose, it means you can also add your own text inside the button. So what we did is here, we have actually added the button, and we also added the text to the button. Without it, there will be no text too. So like, let's say if I go choose Arrested Development, right, favorite movie, my button became enabled, right? Because here I have a parameter enabled, and it is listening to the button enabled changes from my view state, right? So if I decide to type something here and then I remove, my button gets disabled. Why? It's because I have a logic in my view model specifying that whenever we add custom values, custom movie, right? If name is not blank, then we're going to choose the name. Otherwise, movie details, selecting. So if I choose Schitt's Creek here, right, the button becomes enabled and I can click on it and navigate to the details screen. And then in the details screen, I have column again, has an image. As you see here, we are still accessing an XML files to get the resource, drawable resource, and we're using painter resource function to retrieve the drawable from our XML file. And then we're adding text there too. And then also interesting thing in Jetpack Compose, we can also modify the animations. We have like functions called animate color as state, where we can actually play around with animation. In this sample example, it's actually colors. So like, let's say if I change the color here, it's a smooth animation. It happens like tween animation from yellow to gray. And then here it's smoother to back to yellow. And then we can also change this duration as well. Like we can decide to change anytime to be 500, for example. So it's going to be even more faster. If we don't have animation, it's going to be instant change of colors. So there's not nice transition is happening. So that's the power of Jetpack Compose, where you can just do everything within the code itself, and there's no need to juggle around between multiple files. It is also very intuitive, like image, text, right? If you're thinking about how can I add text, right? If you just start typing in, it's pretty, Android Studio, it's pretty fast to find. It will already pre-populates the options that are available. And it says here text, and we can see specifically on this side, it gives quick info of this, quick documentation info explaining what does it do. I did find it very helpful, especially in documentation for Jetpack Compose. It's well written in Android developers guidelines and the Android developer website. It's very well written, easy to understand. Love that they put the reasons behind choosing one approach and not over another one. That one was really cool for me, that I find it. Also, we can also click on the elements itself, go to the superclass, right, and then read up a little bit information about what does this specific UI element in Jetpack Compose do, right? And as you see, the documentation for each element, it's very, very concise and it's well written, that I honestly been loving to develop everything in Jetpack Compose because it's easier to understand. There are a lot of resources, but it's also documented well, very well documented. Just pleasure to develop with, simply. So that was my overview of the Jetpack Compose. Mauricio?
Wow, thank you. I really learned a lot of things myself, even though I did my research on what Jetpack Compose was. I was not really sure at the beginning, but I get to understand a lot of details about it from time to time. And with this talk, I think I've learned a lot of things, very, very important things. And I'm also sure that everyone watching us has learned something new, has learned that with this tool, we can do many, many things in a easier way than things used to be done before.
That is,
So, well, I'm thrilled that some people may have questions at this moment, so we can pass through the Q&A session right now.
yep. Let me give one disclaimer also about the
Okay.
Jetpack Compose. We have discussed the pros and cons, pros of the Jetpack Compose. We didn't discuss the cons part yet. Because Jetpack Compose is still in active development, there are some elements that are still missing. For example, like animations, like some parts of like transition animation from one screen to another, when you actually have this, like you have the list of images and then you open the details and the image actually animates back up. This kind of transitions are still missing. They're in progress. So they will definitely appear later on in the game, but they're still in progress. So like this kind
So
of
you're
stuff.
using traditional methods to apply transitions right now, since there's no Jetpack Compose option.
Yeah, I'm not using any transitions. I'm just using regular navigation controller. So what it does is it's right away puts one screen on top of another one.
All right.
Yeah, and then
What
there's
about
no more fragments
maps?
for maps. So maps, because there's still not a Jetpack Compose for. Well, I'm using Google Maps library, right? There is not support for Google Maps library. Jetpack Compose, it's interoperable. you can still call Android views within the Jetpack. So like, let's say if you put them let me share the screen.
Okay.
So because there's still some missing elements, like let's say we don't have library, right? Compose, we don't have the Google Maps map view. So since Google map view is missing, what we can do is we can call Android view. Its function is available for everyone, right? Like from the Compose itself. And then here we should call the block. That's not the running block. Check button. Let me see if I can find Android widget per se, right? So I can call the checkbox and then pass the values. Okay, so it's asking for context. All right. So I have to look into this one. I forgot already how it's done. But the idea is because Jetpack Compose exposes the Android view composable function, right? And it extends regular view, the traditional Android view. So with this format, right, like Android view, you can add traditional Android views, whether it's a checkbox, right, if you want to put, or like Google Map views, and so on, like map view for Google Maps. So it can be added later on as well. So I need to also, forgot this part already, but there's a way to interoperate between traditional views and the Jetpack Compose.
That's right. That's also, even though we would want, Jetpack Compose to be able to do all of these things, the good part is that we can count on traditional methods for those things, for those libraries that are not yet implemented in Jetpack Compose, and until we wait for their release, right, in Jetpack Compose. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. All right. So for this Q&A session, I am going to invite a co-host who is Galia Villarpando. She's going to read the questions for us. Hi, Galia.
Hi, Aida. Hi, Mauri. So, well, let's start with the question. First, we have Jürgen Rugenberg. That is, his question is this like using fragments?
So one thing to note, there is no fragments. The idea of fragments is that in Jetpack Compose. And honestly, as a developer, I am happy about that. I am so happy because although the idea behind fragments was good, right? So being able to have multiple mini views on top of another one, right? Like, and then still having only one activity. Fragments had flawed issue because you would need to manage the transaction, the fragment transaction. Then you need to manage fragment manager itself to keep in check all this stacks, whether it's a activity stack here or whether it's a fragment stack here, like differently. And each fragment might have also the child fragments. So it would be like one. It's like it would be like Russian doll. Matryoshka, like you never know, you open one, there's another one, and then there are so many of them differently that you have to manage them on a separate occasion. That's what the fragments would do. And with Jetpack Compose, one way to think is to think of it as a custom view. Imagine you have one view on top of another view and on top of another view. That's what it is. And then just using regular the navigation component that basically manages one stack when it removes the view and then adds the view. So that's what I would say. Like that's what Jetpack is more close to.
Thank you, Aida. So let's go with the next question that comes from Joseph Anthony Meneses. So his question says, if we want to see a preview of a specific part with Jetpack Compose, is there a way to see it without ruining the whole application?
Yes, there is a way, there is annotation called preview that we can use, and then we can see how it's done. Like, for example, here, like let's say I have details view, and then if I want to create another function, I would call preview and then create composable function, name it display text. And then so I would say here, it's still gonna be starting to load the information. And it's waiting for me because it does not have any composable elements yet, right? But once I add the text, for example, here, and I put hello, right? So it will appear here. But as you see, the preview is a little slow. It comes it is slow, unfortunately. I did find it that running application is much faster for me, per se. So, okay. Oh. So there you go. Build to refresh. You have to update. There's no such a method. Yeah, so this takes time, but the preview does exist. Preview, it's cool, it's easy whenever, like, let's say you have static information, but if you have a data that the states, view states, right, that depend on something, like something that is coming from the view models, then it gets, again, it gets very cranky and you have to wait until everything is loaded. Like in this example, it's taking time, like to display simple text stuff. Oh, there you go. Okay. There you go. There you go.
Would you rather, so if you are working with some modular parts like this text, it would be very convenient to display it before implementing it. But if it loads a little bit slower than just launching the application, which one do you usually use?
I prefer using an application, right? But here's the one thing to note. It all comes down to how much experience you have in general in Android development, right? Because like I have been doing Android for a longer time, and I know what's going to happen when I decide to add padding like height 16, right? Like where the spacer will look like and how it's going to look like. So I don't build the application as often when I develop. I usually wait until I have finished everything, typing in, then I do. But when you're learning, you do want to see how it looks like. So that's where the preview comes very helpful. I'm pretty sure the Google will spend a lot of time to improve the preview experience, right? So it's going to get better, definitely going to get better, because I understand for a lot of developers, it's helpful to visualize before running the app. Mm-hmm.
So let's go with the next question. So Andre Machicao says, which is the biggest advantage of using Compose over the traditional way?
For me personally, it would be managing the state. That's something that in regular apps that we have to deal with. Like in most cases, like UI never drives the logic. The logic, all the data and information comes down to the UI, and the UI's job is to display the information. But traditional way has a side effect that lets users being able to type in something, to add something, right? And then as a developer, you should be able to handle those side effects, right? Whether there's always like loops around to handle the side effects, where you have to override the on-click listeners, right? You have to decide where to tap, what happens when something is getting clicked, or simple like text change. Whenever the user types in something and you want to actually say, you know what, when the user types something, when it's 4 characters, right, I want to display some sort of message to them. And in order to do that, we have to implement entire text watcher to verify that it works. And then in fact, we have updated, we have displayed something to user. And imagine if we want to save the state, like if we want to say we want to display that celebration only once, then we have to save that state in our data layer. And then we have to call. And then being able to like validate all the stuff between UI and view models do become little, you know, like when you do that on a daily basis on different screens, it becomes too much. You just want to have one stuff. You don't want to worry much about UI. Like you built the UI, you're done with that. You don't need to worry about stuff, what's going to happen. With the Compose, it does that job. It's listening to changes, it gets updated right away. It does not have side effects like, as I mentioned about the toggle, where you can literally, if you type in not the row itself, but on the specific icon there, it says toggle, it will still be clickable. It will still let user click through it, you know, so it's not that helpful for you.
Yes, thank you. So Fernanda Martinez says, Jetpack is for sure awesome for UI, but does it improve for UX?
Honestly, UX, it's up to designers, like of the app developers. Well, there's not much, like when we say UX, do we mean the way how we see things in Android Studio when we develop in Jetpack Compose, or do we mean when we display the apps and then give them to users?
Well, I think she's referring to the last option, like delivering the application to the users.
Yeah, that does not depend. Like it's irrelevant at that point whether it improves or not. The UX experience, it all comes down to design team. Material U, now it's called Material U, but the material design basically has support for Jetpack Compose. Now it's available, a lot of elements, including colors and then themes, you know, it all comes from the material design right now. It's easier to implement them in our code than just doing regular stuff.
So next question comes from Nikki Gongora. How can we use Compose for server and database services in our Android apps?
How can we use Compose? For Jetpack Compose, per se, what benefit it has, it's being able to manage the UI, right? So it all happens on presentation layer. Everything that happens in database and server layers, a lot of developers prefer to use repository layer specifically, where they manage the data, decide where the data comes from, whether from database or from the server. It all comes down to the repository layer, where repository dictates rules around where to get the data from the API or from the database, right? And then repository bubbles up to the view model, and then view model actually decides what to do with the information that it got it from the repository layer. And it says, okay, we have this domain information, let's convert this domain information to the UI state, right? Because there could be some other tweaks around the UI, like we want to make sure we we handle the button being disabled, right? We don't need to save that information in our database layers. Database doesn't care about the button state, but presentation layer, view model and views do care about that stuff. So the view models will have their own view state. Let me share this stuff here. So for this example, let's say I have created a view state, right? It checks whether it's loading, whether I need to display the loader, right? That's why I have the value parameter called loading. And then title. Right now it's hard-coded. And then here's the movies. It's a list of information. That's where, like, let's say when I have the movies, right? That's where I actually can call a repository and then update the values. Let's say upon initialization of my movie, right? I do have some sort of manager, or like some sort of, let's call the repository, right? Like there's repository of something that I will have. And then from here, I would just call my repository and say, hey, can you please get me repository, get movies, right? Like, and then the repository will decide where to get the movies from, whether it's from the API or from the database. Once I get these movies, right, I can actually decide, how about I map this response, this result that I got from my repository, map it to my view state, right? So because I want to make sure I update my view state as well. So what I do is I would do, here's the view state. I actually update the value to my screen, so it's aware about the changes. And I would say, here's the movies, right? I do have movies, and since it's let's call it list, right? So let's assume that get movie to return list. Then I can just pass it here as a list, stuff like that. And so in this case, per se, Jetpack Compose does not really interact with servers or databases. Yeah, so it just gets the information from database and servers via view models.
Awesome. So we are running out of time, but we have some more questions. We'll go with 2 more questions, all right? Okay, so here we go.
So Adrian Rodriguez asks, how Jetpack Compose integrates with Jetpack Navigation Library?
So it integrates via the library. It's the new library, separate library from regular navigation component. There is a library, let me see, what's the name? The good thing, okay, so it's called Navigation Compose. So as you know, Jetpack itself has a lot of parts. It's a compose responsible for the UI. We also have a room, right? Room is a database library, and it's part of Jetpack as well. We also have navigation component, the one that is responsible, you know, the navigation with XMLs, where you drag and drop the pages, and then you create the connections in between. So that's the navigation component. There are a lot of components, and because Room navigation component was created and released way earlier than Jetpack Compose, in order not to break the stuff, component team has a separate library for the navigation within the Jetpack Compose as well too. So it's called Navigation Compose, and it can easily be set in the first run of the app. In this case, it's going to be its main activity, where you actually define nav controller. So, and nav controller is available in the activity level too. So that's where you can actually easily manipulate the data and then decide how you're going to host the navigation, whether it's going to be to home screen or whether it's going to be to detail screen. And then within the detail screens, you can just call navigation, nav controller, navigate to like route. In our case, it's details, because that route is already been defined here by Compose Boss.
Great. So we're going to have this last question.
Mm-hmm.
So Christian Perez says, what is the biggest limitation of Jetpack that Jetpack has?
If you asked me that question back in April, May, I would say the fact that every time when something gets updated, like a new version gets released, you know, all your code that you have that you built unfortunately becomes obsolete and you have to update it. So that was the big part. But now, since the release stable was introduced, I am actually developing everything in release, right? Like in the release build, and have not yet checked to the RC candidates because I know they do have this breaking change, and I'm like, okay, what's happening? Like, there's a lot of learning curve happens, right? So I would say that the Jetpack limitation, it's a learning curve, right? And then the fact that there's development, active development happening on it.
Awesome. So we've finished with the Q&A session. I'm very thankful for all the questions that were made. Thank you very much, Galia, also for joining us and reading the questions for us. So we're going to move through the last part of this amazing Android session. We have a little surprise for you. So we are going to have a quiz. We are using Kahoot this time. This is going to be real fun. So you can start on your web browser. You can look for kahoot.it. That's going to take you to the main page. And in a minute, we're going to be sharing the code so you can participate. So here's the deal. We are going to be giving 3 tickets for delicious American style food with our sponsors tonight, which are Truck Palu and Four Bros. They have given to us 3 tickets, and we're going to give them to the podium, first, second, and third place. So you can participate for these prizes in a minute. Let me share my screen. Here we go. All right, awesome. So, let's see. Here we go. Okay. So the code for the game will be appearing right now. There it is, 1253663.
Mauricio, by the way, are we timing, like whoever first answers the questions will win?
So the deal with this is, of course, answering faster gives you more points, but also answering correct. So it's like 2 criteria that has to be met, and then you're able to be part of the podium.
Awesome.
Great. So while we wait, I was wondering about this, and I think we talked a little bit about this in the past, about which platform to choose to begin developing mobile apps. We have, of course, Android, Kotlin, Jetpack Compose, but on the other hand, we have some other options, and among those other options, we have Flutter, for instance, that's also from Google.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering which is the main reason for a person, a beginner or a senior developer, to choose Jetpack Compose over Flutter.
So I would say to note about the Flutter, there's also React Native, right? The difference between Flutter versus regular Android development is Flutter is multi-platform multi-platform development, right? So if you build the same app in Android, it's going to be available in iOS as well too, right? Because it's written in a Dart language. I would say if it all comes down to the app that you're planning to build. If you want to do, if it's simple app, like let's say we want to have a Google Developer Bolivia student club app that will like shows like it shows upcoming events and so on, right? Like simple ones. Then it does make sense to build in a Flutter because it's simple and it's easy to navigate and it's faster to build and it's available for both mobile phones, iOS and Android for everyone, right? So it does make your development faster. It also makes it available for both platforms. Android native development, if we're going to talk about building everything in Android with Kotlin and then Jetpack Compose or like traditional Android view, what we have to keep in mind is the scale of the app, right? How big will the app go? If the app is only 2-3 screens, you should stick to Flutter. If the app gets more complicated, right, then it makes sense to learn Kotlin and then Android development, right? Nowadays, increasingly mobile apps have become increasingly complex. They're complex. There's not one screen or two screen. They have like a lot of popular apps like Twitter, right? Like Facebook, Instagram. They're very complex, and then like hundreds and hundreds of engineers work on one app. So for that one, the multi-platform Flutter, for example, will have some limitations and it will be difficult to build. So
Great.
say it all comes down to the app.
Yeah, it all comes down to what are you using this application for, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it all comes down to utility. Great. Thank you very much. So I think we have enough people to start our quiz. This is really going to be fun. Okay, so let's begin. Great question. All right. So we have two answers that are correct. Okay, let's go to the next question. Great. All right. I think this is the hardest one.
It is. Yeah. I would recommend to look at exactly the verb write.
Yeah. Great. That's good. Okay, let's continue. Who is at the top? Okay. Okay, this is looking good.
So we talked about decorating UI elements, how we can modify something there, and making sure that it is as flexible as possible, and we don't need to change anything all the way up in the theme layer or like some stuff.
Ooh. Okay.
This was tricky.
Yeah, it was.
This was
Even though you said it while you were explaining it, that's the only word you mentioned. So if someone's really listening, that can help.
Well, this one would be easy. Ah, it's not easy. I actually did not make it easy. Okay, forgot about that.
Yeah, I could also get confused with this one, but well, the answer is there.
The answer is definitely there. Otherwise, oh, they go.
Okay, this one was totally much better. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Let's go. So we have 3 questions left.
Yep.
So I've seen the questions before, and this one was one of the trickiest ones for me, and that I totally answered wrong because I was not sure about this, and
Yes.
yeah,
So
I
this is
assumed
interesting. Is like this question always like think about. Ooh, yee.
that's
Also, so that this one is on me too. It was a good thing no one answered too, but it's also I was gonna mention this stuff is that in composable in Jetpack Compose there is no guarantee that your UIs will be built one after another one the way how you usually expect it to happen in regular code compiler. In Jetpack Compose, there is no guarantee any UI element can be actually triggered first. It also depends because it's recomposition, right? It updates that child view based whether the data was changed for that child view. Like let's say with the text view, we have this, we set the value, say for text field, right? We say change the value whenever user types something in. And then we have a callback for the value change whenever happens, we're actually updating the view model. And then when the view model does get updated, it's actually updating the view state and saying, can you please update the value for this text field, right? And then in that case, entire column will not gonna get updated. Only particular text field will get triggered and updated first.
Well, that was tricky. That was tricky, and it's good to know. It's good to know. I think it's really nice to know that Jetpack Compose actually, well, the composable functions actually function in any order, right?
Yeah, and that's why it is important that you don't have any states or any kind of logic living inside your composables. You have to keep that in mind. It can get triggered anytime, anywhere.
Yeah, that's really, really important. So let's go to the next question. All right. This is your chance.
This is your chance. How did you answer this question, Mauricio?
I also tried to answer this question, but I think I also did a mistake. I don't remember. Let me see. No, I was actually right. Yeah, I was actually
Okay.
right the first time. Yeah.
Cool.
Great. 5 people. Awesome. Okay. Wow. So this is the table. Okay. So we're pretty close. This is the last question. You can catch up.
Oh, that's gonna be an interesting one. Yeah, this is
Okay,
another tricky one.
well, I think it's tricky, but it's also very fundamental to understand.
Yep.
Okay, let's go.
Oh, declarative approach is the Jetpack Compose itself. So, and it's replacing view-based approach in regular Android.
Maybe they got confused as well with states, right?
Yeah, maybe with a question.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, at least nobody said indicative approach.
That's true.
Okay. So here's the podium. Great.
Oh, Andre, congratulations. Nicole is second place. And first, let's see. Oh,
Sol, wow. Great.
Wow, congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Got it 5 out of 7. Wow.
That's good. I think that's a good score.
Yep.
Okay, so these people, Sol, Nicole, and Andre, please send us a DM to our official account, Facebook account, right now, so we can keep in touch with you and transfer you the tickets. And you can get your prizes. Thank you very much to everyone for participating. This has been really fun for us, and I'm sure it's been a really huge and amazing experience for all of you that are growing as developers, learning new tools, and adapting to a changing world. Um, Before we end this amazing session, I would like to thank the people that have been working on this project for so long. First of all, thank you, Aida, for participating with us, for giving us your time and your experience to teach us a little bit about Android Jetpack Compose and what's coming in the future for all of us. So,
Thank you.
also, I want to thank all the departments in our chapter: technology, communications, and logistics. But specifically technology, because they worked on this project. They've been planning on what to talk about, how the whole event would take place, and all that stuff. So I want to introduce you to two people that are here with us tonight: Joel and Fernando Martinez. Um, Hi, Fernanda. Hi, Joel.
Hi.
It's good
Hi
to have
guys.
you. It's good to have you with us. We also have Joseph here. Hi, Fernanda. Hi, Joel. Hi, Joseph. Good
Hi
to have
guys.
you.
Hey, good evening.
It's good to have you with us. We also have Joseph here. Hi, Fernanda. Hi, Joel. I think you're on the live,
Joseph.
right?
Hello, hello. Hey, good evening. Good evening.
Have you with us. If you can quit the live just for a second, that would be awesome. I think. Okay, awesome. So these are some members of the team that have been working really hard this last weeks, preparing everything, arranging also this quiz alongside Aida. So I am very, very grateful for your work. And Joseph, I think you have something to say.
Yes. Well, good evening. Thank you very much for attending and for enjoying tonight's event. No. Well, from the technology department, we hope to see you in the next talks. No. So, thanks for everything.
Great, awesome. So I think we had so much fun. Great. As Joseph said, I hope that we can see you in our next events, in our next activities. We will be having a complete Android study jam sessions starting off the first week of November. So we highly recommend you to join if you are from Universidad Privada Boliviana. And even if you are not from our university, you can actually ask to our team about the registration and all that stuff so you can be part of this great experience. We'll be talking about basics of Android and also more complicated things that will definitely help you in your career. So thank you again, everyone, and I hope you have a good night. Bye, Aida. See you the next time.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure actually being with you guys today and talking about Jetpack Compose.
Awesome. See you the next time.
Next time, till next time. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.